All right, Scott Schrader here with We Are SC and on three
Crash Collier.
and we're just going to talk a little bit USC recruiting here to start off, and then we'll move on to talk a little bit about the team, about the game against Michigan State, the upcoming game against Illinois, maybe some other odds and ends that Crash or I can think of as we go along here. But just want to kind of start off. We talked about last week about the guys that were visiting USC this past weekend for the Michigan State game, and it's really been an impressive list every week. Um, and there were 17 commits that visited. Feedback from them has been very positive, as you could imagine. But there were also some key 2027 prospects that did make the game. There were a couple that we had on our list, like Aaron Washington from Mater Dei and Danny Lang. They were driving back from Las Vegas after playing Bishop Gorman, and they did not make the game. Mark Bowman, I don't think he made it either. I didn't see him anyways. So there were some guys that did not make the game that were on our list. But one key 2027 defensive back. One of the guys at the top of USC's board was Dante Wright from Long Beach Poly. He will be back multiple times. I think down the road, he is definitely going to be taking a USC official visit too. He's committed to Georgia, committed there a few months ago. Elijah Harmon, a local defensive lineman, he's at the very top of USC's board from Inglewood, California. He visited. This was his second game. He was also at the Missouri State game, and he just talked about how the being at the Coliseum and watching USC this year has really helped the Trojans, and that he's seeing the play on the field play out like the USC football coaches told him it would with their defensive linemen, and that's not an insignificant. I mean, that's going to be significant with a lot of guys I'm going to be mentioning here. Not they're going to get all these guys, but there's going to be guys I'm going to be mentioning that are from out of state and they're already planning on coming back for a second, third, sometimes fourth visit. So. Yeah, well, before that, we'll mention a couple of local guys. Khalil Terry, safety from Tustin, California. He was also at his second game. He's part of the Trillion Boy 7-on-7 family. And I know that he's liking USC really a lot as well. And another safety, Gavin Williams from Damien High School. USC is just everybody I talk to and stuff I'm hearing, the feedback on him is USC's in a very strong spot for him. At this point, if there was a commitment date down the road, I would definitely put a prediction in for USC with Gavin Williams. Ace Alston, cornerback from Anderson High School, and I believe I don't know. I'm not sure if it was Cincinnati, but anyway, he this is his second visit to USC. He is actually a 7-on-7 teammate with USC quarterback commit Jonas Williams. This is one of those guys I was talking about that said he is definitely planning on coming back for another visit, as is Ronaldo Perez, who is an edge from Columbus, Ohio, right in the heart of Buckeye country. He comes out, takes a visit. Everybody's thinking, oh, he's going to Ohio State, and he probably will, for all we know. But he is a guy who's also saying he can't wait to get back really soon. So you have a guy that took his first visit, comes out and watches USC play, and he's already talking about coming back for another visit. Another out of state with the guy that I mentioned briefly here was KJ Green. He's visited USC once prior to the Michigan State game. Had a chance to work out with Eric Henderson and Sean Nua in June in a camp setting. He was at USC. He said, "Hell yeah!" when I asked him if he's planning on coming back. And then you have Zane Rowe from Denton, Texas, and this was his first visit to USC. He's among the top 8 or 9 guys that USC has on their board at that position. He just told me this morning that he's planning on coming back to USC as well. I didn't get it. He didn't say whether it's going to be this year or not, but it's significant that these guys are talking about already coming back. And then you have Samson Satele from Mililani High School, linebacker. He's one of the top 2 or 3 linebackers on the board for USC. This was his first visit to USC. He told me he was going to come out for a game when we were with him in May, and he did show up with his brother, who is a class of 2028 edge defensive line prospect, and he's Tristan Satele, hell of a player. Both these guys are really good. And then Taven Epps is an interesting one. He's from Tustin High School, committed months ago to the University of Texas. He showed up at the Georgia Southern game with his Trillion Boys 7-on-7 team. I didn't really think that much of it, but he came back for another visit for the Michigan State game, and that was kind of telling in my opinion. So he's another guy that we expect to see around on a regular basis, and I'm told that USC definitely is going to continue pursuing him, and that this could be something that could develop into a flip, maybe potentially down the road for all we know. Um, And then the last guy that I want to mention is um, Alafaleti Tui Halamaka. You guys might remember the name Tui Halamaka. I had a brother USC recruited. He ended up at Notre Dame. He's a guy that is not talk. We don't talk about very often as being one of the top targets, but this is a really, really good football player from Oaks Christian. And if USC is trying to stay local, like they're talking about, and maybe some of the other guys from out of state end up staying closer to home, this is a guy for us to maybe look at. And after that, Jalen Flowers, class of 2028 prospect from Palos Verdes. So it was really another great showing for USC from a recruiting perspective. They won't be hosting anybody this week because the Trojans are in Champaign, Illinois, to face the Fighting Illini. So there's no commits right now for the class of 2027. But when USC does get to the point where they felt like they've evaluated these guys maybe a few more weeks down the road, we might see some commitments. And when they do come, they're going to come in bunches. So anyway, that'll just prompt us to move on to get some commentary here from the past game against Michigan State. And what did you see, Crash?
So I think one thing I do want to point out, just slightly piggybacking off of what you were talking about the recruits here, Scott, was just what all the positive reviews as I was doing my research for today, what all of them were saying, just how they just love the environment, love the crowd. Say we don't about being a late kickoff, it was definitely an exhausting game from that part, at least being in the stands. But I think
Yep.
just that night environment, especially against a program like Michigan State that is going to have fans show up, and especially with the USC fans still showing up in bunches and really packing the Coliseum in response to the open letter from Lincoln Riley and Chad Bowden. I think it really just helps those recruits realize this is an electric atmosphere. I want to play here. That was really my takeaway as I was prepping, was just how pretty much every recruit who spoke publicly about their visit, how excited they were and how they can see them envision themselves on that Coliseum field.
Yeah.
But now on to the game itself. I thought it was really good. I've really been impressed with how Jade Mayava has looked, continues to look, especially just still no interceptions. I think he's just really he's just looking more and more comfortable every week on the field. And then you also have to factor in two things. Jacoby Lane was out. He did not play, and just Makai, that did not stop the Spartan. That did not stop Makai Lemon from going off and having himself a game. And then also Elijah Page getting injured at halftime. And then just the offensive line adjusting and still being able to play pretty solidly to protect Jade Mayava and allow him to execute the offense for the most part. So I was really impressed with that. Obviously, I think they'll have a bit of a bigger challenge, and having both Lane and Page back could be crucial. Hopefully, they're available. It sounds like because of how Lincoln Riley often likes to keep that information close to his chest until he's required to disclose, we may not find out until about 7 a.m. when we're waking up to get ready for the game, to turn on our TVs to
Yeah.
watch the pregame, get ready for the game as we're having breakfast. We may not know literally until the Big Ten publishes its injury report. So hopefully it's good news there, but could be crucial there. On the defensive side, though, I definitely am still impressed with the front seven, the linebackers, but still I think definitely the secondary does need some work, especially as you could argue Kamari Ramsey should be. There's been a lot of calls for Kamari Ramsey be moved back to safety from the nickel spot, but USC is getting some good news with cornerback Alex Graham being back practicing in pads yesterday, and hopefully that continues on into today. And we'll see, does he get limited reps? Are they going to keep him out and just wait through the bye and try to have him more help, able to play a bit more when it comes to Michigan 2 weeks after? So those were my thoughts overall from the game, but overall really impressed with how the Trojan offense went off and how the defense was still able to, for the most part, hold them off. Obviously, there were a couple times where it got a little gnarly, a little sketchy there, but I thought USC for the most part overall did a good job doing a good job to take care of a team that they were supposed to beat.
The defensive breakdowns in the secondary, that's stuff. There are certain issues you can fix, and there's certain issues you can't. And that's one of those issues you can absolutely fix. Guys start playing more. You watch film, and guys learn from playing in the games much more than they learn from practices. So it's just things you can't fix is when USC was just being run over from the interior defensive line was being run over in the past couple of years. So what we're seeing now is the complete opposite of that. You have a defensive line that has been dominating through 4 games, and two of the guys that have been a part of that those dominating performances are true freshmen, and Floyd Bucard and Jakeem Stewart, and both guys in consecutive weeks from rivals earned true freshman standout players of the week or something like that, whatever it might be. Anyway, people are noticing what they're doing, and rightfully so. What Jakeem did on a couple of plays in this last game to be able to get in the defensive backfield as fast as he did, almost tackle the quarterback before he handed the ball off to a running back, is stuff that we have absolutely not seen at USC for a long, long time. So there's a lot of things to be impressed about with USC. And I think that, we'll probably be repeating ourselves every week on this, but that defensive line continues to play like they do. That gives USC a chance to win any ball game in any environment in the country. So on to the offense. Excuse me. My perspective is that was the best game Lincoln Riley had at USC since he got here from a play calling perspective. Now, obviously, when you're running the ball the way that they did, it makes life a lot easier. But he was running the ball, and they were successful. And credit to Zach Hansen on what he's done with getting those guys together on the offensive line and having to perform at a pretty high level right now.
Absolutely. And I think you got to really factor in, like on the offensive side, just that performance, like you said, Scott. And I think just when you have those running backs who are also able to do it, it makes it good. And I agree with you that Lincoln Riley had one of his best games as an offensive play caller, especially when you could argue Jade Mayava is like completely the right quarterback for the air raid system that he employs on his offense because Mayava, and I'm not trying to say he's better than Caleb Williams. What Mayava does is he plays more within the structure of the offense. He doesn't sometimes. I'm not trying to say he can't make big plays like Caleb did, because what Caleb did is, don't get me wrong, absolutely incredible. But Mayava knows just how to, when it is the right time to take off and when it is the right time to throw it or check it down. So I think he does a better job at just playing within the structure, and that I think is ultimately helping the offense be better, especially when you factor in he's just got a better offensive line that I think has really gelled, really, really trust each other, and still, which really impressed me, did really well after Elijah Page went out injured.
Yeah. Hey, Justin Tawanu'u. Good for him. Way to step up. Yeah. So you do look at these guys that on that offensive line. I mean, we really had no idea who the starters were going to be, and we really didn't know if the starters game one were going to be the same in game two, and as it turned out, they weren't. So now we're in a situation to where it gets a little bit more tricky without Elijah Page. Now you have to put somebody in a spot that they were feeling pretty good about left tackle, and see how that works out. So, again, credit to Zach Hansen on what they've done with the offensive line, and credit to Jaden Mayaba as well. There's going to be a point where he's not going to be getting 4.5 seconds to throw the ball. I think that was a stat that USC's leading the country on how long they're giving the quarterback to throw on average. I think it was 4.5 seconds. I think second was Oregon at 4.2 for Dante Moore. And I might be wrong, but even if I am wrong, you guys understand what I'm talking about. The offensive line is doing one hell of a job protecting him. So there's going to be a point where he is going to face a little bit more adversity than he has thus far. But that said, he looks like a completely different person this year. I even asked Lincoln Riley yesterday after we were done asking him questions in this media scrum. Are you even? I mean, has Jaden Mayab even exceeded your expectations? And he was kind of taking off his microphone and all that kind of stuff. He kind of looked up at me and he goes, "I don't know, Scott. My expectations are pretty high." That's when you realize you're not talking to a high school coach here, right? You're talking to a guy that's had multiple Heisman Trophy winners. But he did go on to talk about how Jaden, the level of confidence that he does have right now. And it was almost like a personality change. Like he was given permission to take over control of the football team, and he did, and he's run with it. So, yeah, there's a lot of positive things to think about offensively and defensively. Understandably, they cannot continue to have the breakdowns in the defensive secondary every week, especially when you go on the road. They cannot continue to have penalties that prolong these drives when they've had a great defensive stand. Maybe it was a 3-and-out, or maybe they stopped them, on their side of the 50-yard line. I can't really blame USC for the running into the kicker, because that guy was clearly blocked into the. Was That was that Tamir? Who was that got blocked into the? I shot video of it, but I'm so concerned about what's going on. I missed who the player was.
I think I missed it too, but I
All
completely
right.
remember it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. It's clear that he was pushed into the punter.
And
That said,
those situations can also get a little tricky too, just because it's like, what are you supposed to do if the guy still has the ball? You're supposed to go for him, but then once he gets rid of it, it's kind of tricky to slow down. So
yeah.
I'm not
Especially if
trying.
you're first.
I'm not trying to say, oh, like to let it. I'm gonna let that one slide, but that stuff does happen occasionally, and it's just
Yeah.
like those guys get put in tricky spots when they are having to deal with when the guy is gets rid of the ball versus when he still has it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's extra hard to stop going in the direction of the punter when you're pushed into the punter. So
That
we
too.
can all we can also agree on that. So, but even after that, it was not a first down. So Michigan State decides to go for it, and what happens? USC gets called for a penalty, 12 men on the field. So those are the type of penalties. I think it happened twice in this game, but they had a sideline warning and stuff like that. I mean, that's stuff that the USC football staff has to eliminate. This is not even on the players. So that kind of stuff can get cleaned up, and sometimes it doesn't. But I do believe with this football team and the coaches that they do have at USC, I expect them to play a much cleaner game at Illinois.
For sure, they're going to have to. And I mean, this game is honestly interesting because I think a lot of people probably thought it was going to, be more intense. Everyone thought, oh, Illinois is looking great. I mean, you especially look how they finished last year, how they came into this year pretty strong. And then just Indiana, they face Indiana, and the Hoosiers just do what they want. They
Yeah.
lose, they beat them 63 to 10, which just has me wondering, is Illinois worse than everybody thought? Or is Indiana a lot better than we thought? And I know
Yeah.
obviously Indiana's taken a lot of criticism for their non-conference schedule. That's obviously continuing in the years to come, especially as the SEC and ACC have announced moving to 9 game schedules with power conference opponent requirements too, by the way.
Yeah.
Whereas Indiana, Kurt Signetti tried to be all smart, saying, "Oh, we're doing the same thing as the SEC, playing 9 power conference opponents," and that's now kind of blowing up in his face a little bit. But still, even still, I think Indiana's been obviously has improved a lot. You got to give Kurt Signetti a lot of credit, but still, just because of how they just demolished Illinois, I'm just wondering, are the Fighting Illini as good as we thought? So I'm
Yeah.
still really interested, like how they're gonna play, how they're gonna match up against USC, and this is obviously a game USC can't get caught looking ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the one thing I don't fear from this coaching staff is the players looking ahead to anything. But um, I think that it's been talked about enough the entire preseason that I don't think they're going to look at the scoreboard from the Indiana game and just assume that Illinois, these guys were able to watch them on film and whatnot. Now that said, Illinois has a lot of issues, and Illinois is definitely not as good as people thought. They definitely were not a top 10 football program, but they're also not, I don't think, 63 to 10 bad either. So, and they're going to be at home and they're going to be pissed. So you add a couple of those elements in there and USC just can't help them. That's what USC did last year, is that they just kept helping teams stay in games and win games. So we'll see if they've really truly, despite what happened at Indiana, this is really the biggest test for USC this week.
Absolutely. And I think though, one thing that if they do watch the game film, if they're watching the game film from that Indiana game of the Illini, is that there's a lot they can learn, especially that if they can just put pressure on Luke Altmaier early, he's going to struggle, I think, is something we saw, especially just how Indiana sacked their quarterbacks. I believe it was 7 times from when I was looking at the stats last
16
night.
pressures too. It was what it
Yeah,
was.
so just all that is going to put a lot of pressure on Luke Altmaier, and I think if they can do that, and really that's I think if they can just start early and put him under pressure, I think he'll struggle, and then force enough to get rid of the ball early, and then that's where the secondary issue that has been kind of talked about pretty extensively over the last few weeks is going to need to really step up for when Altmaier goes deep.
Yeah. So anyway, so a lot to look forward to. And we got three of us heading to Illinois on Friday, Eric and Mark and myself. So we'll all be there. It's supposed to be 80 degrees and sunny, so we got that going for us. But it's going to be one of those days to where we're getting up at 4 a.m. in Chicago for that 2-hour drive down to Champaign, Illinois. So
What time are you gonna try to get? Are you gonna catch big noon kickoff at all? Try to catch any of that, or how does
we
that
don't
go?
catch on a day like this. We catch nothing.
Okay, I was just
I
curious
mean,
because I mean it does. If we didn't really talk about it much, but it is something that also is going to factor probably into how the Illini play as well, especially when you got Fox and the whole big noon
yeah,
staff coming in. It's like, wait, we got all these people, we got this whole production team coming in to set up their show. Fans are going to probably be camping out all night, lining up at like what 2, 3 a.m. local time, if or whatever it is, but just lining up really early to get in there,
yeah.
possibly pulling all nighters. So they're gonna have their fans there for a long time, and they're gonna be and they're gonna be motivated, I think, because of that.
Probably so. I mean, it's going to be a hell of an environment. Hopefully, that's part of why I'm going. I've never been to Illinois, so there's not a whole lot that I gain by going to USC football games from a content perspective. But we'll do our field view video and whatnot. But yeah, look, they play the games for a reason. There's all of us have been around, even somebody young like you's been around long enough to watch these insane upsets happen. And USC fans that are old enough will always remember the Stanford game when USC was a 49-point favorite, and they ended up getting beat. 7 turnovers later, you lose to anybody. So you got to go out and you got to play a good football game because Illinois is not a bad football team. So that score last week, yeah, you got to throw that out. That's going to be an aberration, I'm sure. An outlier for Illinois this season, I would imagine. But they do have some key injuries like USC, and I think they're getting a couple of guys back in their secondary this week, so that's not insignificant.
Absolutely, yeah. I think definitely, yeah. USC's got to just come ready to play with their A game and can't just let anything that they've seen or any of the injuries make them think, all right, we got this. But
Yep,
I still think they do need to come out, start strong. If they can, definitely put pressure on them early, they could at least, be playing pretty comfortably, but they cannot get complacent under any circumstances, no matter how wide of margin that score difference gets.
yep. So anyway, all right. Well, we'll get back next week and we'll rehash. We'll have a little bit of stuff. I'll go to a couple of football practices, maybe not games this week in the next coming days. We got Lincoln Riley again today, Danson Lynn after practice and the defensive players. So we'll have some of that content up later. So anyway, we'll see you next week.
Right on.
Bye now, everybody.